Word. All right. Morning, everybody. I want to welcome everybody from Midwest Brainspotting Institute. I'm Josh Delahan on the board. We have a couple other board members here, Jessica and Holly. So welcome to you as well. Julie is here. She's going to be the presenter, and let me get some people in here. We're so excited to hear about neural safety. I don't know much about it, but it sounds like things that my clients need. So I'm super excited to hear about it. So let me give you her introduction here. So Julie Swensen is a licensed clinical social worker. She is the co-owner of Peak Mental Health and the clinical director of POS Wellness in Logan, Utah. Julie is in her second year of a PhD program for clinical social work. Prior to moving into private practice, she worked in a hospital setting, as well as working with individuals and their families in home health and hospice. Julie specializes in treating the multitude of ways anxiety, depression, and trauma manifest in life, as well as helping people navigate their ADHD and neurodiversity. In her downtime, Julie can be found spending time with her amazing family, enjoying the great outdoors, studying mental health, and eating chips and salsa and sitting in her massage chair, which sounds amazing. So welcome, Julie.
Well, thank you. I'm definitely excited to be here and to see some familiar faces. I think, is Bonnie on your board as well?
Yes.
Is she on the board?
Yes.
Okay, I want to give a little shout out to Bonnie. If you can see this sign above my head, and I don't know if you can read it, but she sent that to me. And I don't think she knows it made my wall on my office. I'd like to thank my middle finger for always sticking up for me. And I needed it.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, so I just want to shout out to Bonnie and her picture on my wall.
She'll love to see that.
It's a little bit of an inside joke.
Okay.
If you know me, you know I kind of like my middle finger. Melissa knows.
Awesome.
I'm excited to share with you neural safety. There is a lot of information. I'm just going to give you kind of the skeleton, the bare bones of this. So feel free to ask questions and things like that, but we will save those for about mid, and then at the end, I'll try to do a 5-minute break. Please keep yourself comfortable. If you need to turn off your screen or eat while we're doing this, that's wonderful. Just do whatever you need to do to create your learning environment. I might also suggest if you don't have a notebook, you might want one, because this is kind of information rich, but know that you don't have to take it all in. The information, I'm happy to share these setups with you at the end too. So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to just jump right in. Here we go. All right. So I call this neural safety. This is centered around feeling safe in your body. And so I want to kind of explain the genesis of this, or how this all began. And I'm going to take you back to prior to the Brainspotting conference, the international conference, which I believe that was in 2021. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I had been trying to learn Pi's OCD setup and trying to figure it out on my own. And I got to the conference and I sat through Pi's mini training of it. And it seriously was, I remember sitting there looking around like this was like Christmas in my brain. And that's how it felt. And if you've heard me share this story before, I've shared that same analogy. I just think there were all these connections being made because I couldn't get it to click. But once it clicked, my brain was like, we are off and running. So if you're familiar with Pi's OCD, how she sets up the frame for OCD, then this first part of neural safety will feel very familiar. And then it varies off of that. But I do want to definitely give a shout out to Pi. Here, this is where my heartfelt gratitude comes in. And if you want a little music, I'll bring some music. They've been my supporters and a little bit of my inspiration. I need to set this up. So with her OCD setup, this becomes the foundation for neural safety. And we're going to go to the next screen. Okay. And then this is also like partnering brains. This isn't a full like reference list, but this just gives you an idea of like the lineage, if you will, of where this information is coming from. Some of this is just my own lived experiences as I've been doing this for a few years now. And then I am kind of a nerd when it comes to studying the brain. And so pulling from lots of other resources as well. So quick overview. We're going to discuss the purpose of neural safety. And if you're not familiar with it, you might start with more questions than really answers. And that's, just if you can, just notice what comes up in you as we talk about this, because it is it's different. And I think it's just different enough that that I'm hoping that you'll find this very useful, but it might challenge a little bit of how you conceptualize brain spotting. So hopefully expand other ways of utilizing this great therapeutic technique, if you will. So then we're going to talk about why a top-down, bottom-up approach, because traditional brain spotting, if it's okay if I'm saying it in that light, is more of a bottom-up, top-down approach. And this is actually a top-down, bottom-up approach. And so it feels different. It works beautifully with just, all the other ways that we can set up the frame in brain spotting. We're then going to discuss physical safety. And I'll show you how you find the first of 3 spots. There's 3 spots I'll help you find today. And the first one is physical safety. Then that's when we'll kind of have a break. We'll pause for a brief question time. And then if you need to go to the bathroom or stretch or do whatever you need to do. And then we'll come back and we'll talk about relational safety. And then I'll talk to you a little bit more about the reticular activating system and how we can use that in helping with overall emotional regulation. And then we'll have questions at the end again. Sound okay? So the purpose of neural safety is really to orient to a present-centered, felt sense in this present moment of physical and relational safety. So neural safety draws attention more to the brain circuits in your mind than what happened to you or what experiences you've gone through. So we hold a lot of respect for that because that is definitely, a big part of our mental health. But we want to kind of create a little bit of space between maybe, some of the struggles and traumatic experiences people have gone through to help bring people into more about what's going on in my mind right now in my body as we talk about this. And so it's designed to facilitate overall emotional regulation and improve your executive functioning skills. We have these innate capacities, and so we want to help the client more actively engage with their parasympathetic nervous system and access that ventral vagal or calm state. So I do pull from polyvagal theory in this. And it is a brain-based top-down, bottom-up approach. And as we go on, I'll explain that more and it will make a little bit more sense. This neural safety helps strengthen capacities to engage in trauma processing from a bottom-up approach too, because we're really teaching people how to work with their nervous system, kind of how to befriend. And the best way I can find to describe this is like we're teaching their nervous systems how to orient to safety. And with that sense of safety in that ventral vagal state, we actually create a sense of agency so that we can kind of choose for ourselves how we want to show up and respond. Our defenses come in, and I think it's fair to say a lot of us are living more in a fight or flight or shutdown state with periods of ventral vagal, and we want to flip that around. So as we go into fight or flight or shut down through life, just this doing this alone was a worked my nervous system a little bit too, but knowing we can come back out and it's going to be okay. So I'm actually, I took this from Mario Salvador Fernandez, and this article that Cherie Lindbergh actually gave me, she shared with me, it's called "The Frame as a Listening and Accessing the Deep Emotional Life, the Lens to Reach the Subcortical Brain." I found that whole article, if you get a chance to look at it, it's fascinating and wonderful. But this is coming straight from him, and he talks about the primary emotional systems, the deep subcortical, have a natural wisdom and provide us with immediate responses programmed by evolution. They do not require the cognitive process or learning, which I think, we're pretty familiar with that idea. But what is of interest here to see that the emotional lives of adult subjects are as strongly linked to the higher cognitive capacities as to the lower emotional networks. But the higher capacities do not have a life of their own. So as I read that, I took that, and I'm thinking about safety. I see that as with these higher capacities, we're here to teach and to learn. We don't come out of the womb knowing everything. And we kind of teach our brain and body how to work together to ride a bike and to do, other things that we want to do to help us enjoy life. And so here, I just kind of see that in the same light, that we're teaching our brain how to promote self-regulation. So I have this little clip from Joe Dispenza. It was a TED Talk he gave. It looks a little old, but I think you'll like the information he shares. It's about 30 seconds long.
So your neocortex, your thinking brain, is the seat of your conscious awareness. You're listening to me right now with your neocortex. And what the neocortex loves to do is to gather information. And every time you learn something new, you make a new synaptic connection in your thinking brain. That's what learning is. Learning is forging new connections. And every time you learn something new, your brain physically changes.
I loved seeing the graphics on that. So we want to help create new synaptic connections and tapping into neuroplasticity through this. And when our nervous system feels safe, it's much easier to do that. So these are, I'm not going to go over this slide too much, but these are just some client reviews. And I also have shared this with other therapists too. And so it's just interesting to see how this setting up the frame this way has helped people differently in their life. And I've used it actually with all of my clients. If they like to brain spot, this neural safety works very well with them. And so just highlighting, our body is always on alert, trying to keep us safe, and our mind, our brain. And what can happen, I'm hoping my cursor can come out. So if you think of it like a radar, like ground control, trying to keep us safe. And we also don't want our brain to misrepresent like danger signals when maybe that plane, it's looking like a terrorist plane, and it's really just Delta flying into Salt Lake City, or it's an eagle. It's not dangerous. So we can distort reality when we're living in these heightened states of fear and threat. All we want to do is this healthy neuroception to be able to accurately and more effectively orient to safety and gauge what's going on in our world. Okay. So you might think, well, what are the benefits of feeling safe? And this comes from Stephen Porges's work, great article on safety. He talks about when humans feel safe, their nervous system supports the homeostatic functions of health, growth, and restoration. That when we're in a chronic state of fight or flight, those resources are being pulled from the healthy ways of being. And it's keeping us activated in the anticipation of threat or danger. Also, I think a great benefit of this is as we feel safe, we become accessible to others without overwhelming feelings of threat and vulnerability. So essentially, feeling safe equals emotional regulation. And the consequences of feeling safe provide the neural platform for cooperative behaviors, both supportive psychological systems, and enable accessibility to higher brain structures for learning, creativity, appreciation of aesthetics, and even spirituality. So really, this is where we want to be. We have a cortex for a reason, and we want to be able to use it. And then we can neutralize those strategies that are set up for defense. Now, I might highlight this again in the video, but while this is on my mind, I don't want to not say this. I want to truly recognize that for some people, feeling safe is a privilege, hands down. And so if even, in those situations, if you can create a sense of safety in in the therapeutic space that you're in together, and giving them moments of feeling safer, or if the word safe is too triggering, a couple of thoughts there. We want to teach them that words, we don't want to fear words, but change the wording. I can feel calm. We'll call this neural calm if you need to. Find what works for them. And there's a lot of flexibility in this. And I have found, for me as a therapist, as I've been practicing this, it's just easier to be present and not feel like I need to fix things, or my whole presence with them is so much better that you can kind of trust your judgment a little bit more too. So I don't want to go over this whole slide. This is Joseph Ledoux from his book, Anxious. But I do want to point out is he talks about, we have these survival circuits, and that when these circuits are triggered, it activates areas of the brain that they release chemical signals, neuromodulators, and hormones that keep us in this aroused state. And as you go to the bottom, if you're reading this, this global defensive motivational state reflects the wholesale mobilization of the brain and body resource for the purpose of staying alive. So this is very important when there is imminent danger. But outside of that, we don't need to be in fight or flight when there's no imminent danger. And I use this too with shame. When you haven't committed a horrible moral failing, we don't need to be holding on to shame. That, shame to some degree might remind you to go back, if the bank teller gives you $200 extra, maybe that's your conscious, maybe that's your, a healthy shame, if you will, however you choose to look at shame, to be like, Julie, go back and put that money, give her that money. That is not okay. Or you just hit somebody, go back. We want to see that we don't want to be living in these heightened states, because it distorts reality, and it really leads us to question our worth and the worth of other people. Okay, so I know I'm going kind of fast, but I'm worried I'm going to run out of time. So this is how I've conceptualized this. You don't need to conceptualize it this way, but if it's helpful for you, I'm just trying to, the brain is so complex, and trying to get more comfortable in the complexity of the brain isn't always easy. But I've conceptualized it this way because it helps me just understand a little bit more what could be going on. So when we think of physical safety, when we don't feel physically safe, we feel fear. And if we can put this along a spectrum, where on one end of the spectrum is this sense of agency, like it's safe to, I'm safe, and kind of go about and do whatever it is I need to do. And again, this is, going back to, for some people, it's really hard to even feel safe. But we go from personal agency. We all will have, I just call them irrational fears, like the grasshopper is going to eat me. Just where it feels like life threat. And then if you, at the opposite end of that spectrum, I'm just going to go to extreme OCD and all that can entail, which is a lot. And I know, as I've studied OCD, and for those that do a lot of research around it, they say this is the most debilitating thing. And I've got clients with extreme OCD, and I support that 100%. So if we put that along a spectrum, we're all probably going to follow along that, maybe depending on the day or what's going on in our life. And, if we're dealing with OCD, it leaves us with a sense of something bad's going to happen to me. Physical safety is threatened. And I like this acronym. When you're not in danger, fear is false evidence appearing real. So then, as we look at then relational safety, when we don't feel relationally safe, and this can be real or perceived, and when we don't feel that safety, we feel shame. So I'm just using that same spectrum of idea. We go from personal agency, where it's safe to be me, safe to make mistakes. It's safe to, kind of live my life and learn and grow just like anybody else. But we can move into that irrational shame. And I think most shame is irrational, so it could just say shame. But this sense of, an example of this is everyone's judging me, or, it could be a wide range of things. I'm worthless. I'm too much for everyone. It goes a little to the extreme, but the way I see it is at the other end is this extreme, and I have RSD there. That's rejection sensitive dysphoria. We'll talk about that briefly down the presentation. But this is this heightened sense of shame, where like a pit in your stomach, maybe some heat, your face goes flush, looping shame-based thoughts. And we're going to see that along a spectrum too. Now, if you have ADHD, I believe this is common with like bipolar and autism. Rejection sensitivity is kind of part of the package, if you will. And so understanding this and sharing this knowledge with your clients, it can be very helpful, so they can kind of differentiate and separate who they are from what they're feeling in their body. And this we can work with and help heal that shame and change their relationship with shame. So a good acronym for shame, and I learned this from a Brene Brown video, should have already mastered everything. And so I just kind of added, and so should everyone else. Like this idea that I should have life all figured out. And sometimes I'll be, in this space and pointing fingers. Why does my husband do this? Or, oh my gosh, my children always leave a mess. I tend not to be as critical as maybe people in society. I don't know why I save that for the people I love the most. But this idea, I love this idea about shame, and just recognizing it leaves us with this sense of I should have everything all figured out. And so should everyone else, when really nobody has it all figured out. We're all continuing to learn and grow. I hope our knowledge doesn't stop with where we're at right now. We're building off of each other, and we're all continuing to learn and grow as we evolve through life. And, we hope that knowledge and wisdom improve too. So I love this little picture. And as you think about the state that you're in, and on here, you can see that everybody's in maybe a different state. Is you look at like a freeze shutdown. And maybe you can think about times in your own life when you've been there. Fight or flight, or this social engagement, this ventral vagal state of safety. And you can see what could be going on in somebody's system during those moments. I can't tell if Bernie is shut down or if he's feeling calm and just chilling on the roller coaster. And I love too that this shows that we can all be in a similar situation and walk away feeling differently about it too. So really wanting to respect our own nervous system, what's going on within us, and what might be going on in other people. Okay. So I have this little clip. This is my daughter. And just kind of see, she goes pretty quickly through a ventral vagal state, fight or flight, And then she shuts down. And this one's funny, but it's not so funny when this is your reality. Will you eat your vegetables?
Yeah.
Then eat them. Eat your vegetables.
No. No, no, no.
Hadley, eat your vegetables. What are you doing? Hadley. No is still her favorite word. Will you eat your vegetables? It doesn't change. Vegetables? Will you eat your... Okay. Maybe I'll give you a second to breathe, or maybe I just need to breathe. I feel like I'm going through this really fast. If maybe, where are we at time-wise? If somebody does have a question they want to ask, I think we can stop right now for a question.
Okay, go ahead and use your raise hand function at the bottom of your screen there if anybody has a question, and then we can see who.
Yeah, and if there's no questions, we'll just keep going. Holly, it looks like you have a question.
It's more of a statement that it looks like you put so much work into this. Like, I'm neurodivergent and I also work with many. And so I'm just so thankful, like you're putting a new kind of view, like I'm putting on blue sunglasses instead of brown sunglasses. And I'm thankful for that. I just wanted to say thank you. And there's so much detail. I can't write this fast. So I'm glad this is going to be recorded so I can go back and have all of your sightings and things like that. So just thanks. I think this is great. You're doing great. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate the feedback. And I'm not afraid of a little negative feedback too. I've worked on my RSD. Like, hey, we need to talk about this. I can take it. Okay. Anybody else? Oh, wonderful. Thanks, Holly. I can just see two participants have raised their hand. If
Sarah.
Sarah, please ask your question.
I am struggling between, like, I was a former teacher and now a therapist, that this is a lot of information. How do you integrate this into sessions? Because I think that I could go one way or another and kind of miss the emotional connection or the attunement.
Mm-hmm. I like that you're asking that question. That's a great question. And I'll show you, I do have a demo. I've already pre-recorded it that I'll show you. And we cognitive front load. You don't even need to do a lot of cognitive front loading. I think as a therapist, it's good to understand like this kind of the bigger picture. And then you will still stay in the tail of the comment as you teach. You kind of notice what comes up in the client, what they notice, so that you can share this knowledge with them. Even just even a little bit of knowledge goes a long way with helping with regulation, and these things start coming online. So does that answer your question?
I think it's more of like maybe an internal struggle of wondering, was there too much of the psychoeducation in the moment? Because I tend to be like in the moment and really wanting to work with that, but at the same time, using that part of your brain that is like a nerd as well, who wants to know more and information and all that stuff. And then I'm like, I can totally miss the emotional connection. And so was hoping to see how to integrate that more smooth or refine my own personal skills in that.
Yeah, and as you do this, if you feel like this is something that you want to put into practice, which I hope it feels helpful for you to do that, you'll find that it starts to flow. And I definitely, this is just for your knowledge, but I try not to give a lot of knowledge. There's a few basic pieces that I share in the setup that we haven't even got there yet. The basic, there's 3 parts to the brain that we talk about, and I'll introduce the pink squishy brain, so you'll kind of see why I got that little guy on the screen. And I try to keep it simple. And then, but there are some nerds out there, you know, and I have a few physicians that I work with, and EMTs that are kind of nerd out a little bit on the brain stuff. And so I might bring that up a little bit more. But other than that, people just want to feel better. So hopefully as we go through this too, at the end, if you don't feel like, you know, you're understanding where I'm coming from or anything as we progress through this, please raise your hand again and say, okay, I still need help with this.
Any other questions before we move on? All right, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. And thanks for those questions. Now, bringing in faulty circuits, because part of this is you're helping the client see that we do have false alarms, faulty circuits, misinterpretations of threat. And so recognizing, this is Thomas Inzel. He was the director of the National Institute of Mental Health, I believe. He's got a great article called Faulty Circuits. But he talks about just these brain regions that function together to carry out normal mental operations. He uses the analogy of electrical circuits. And the latest research, this is 2010, by the way, I get it, it's a little old, but I think we're still there. The latest research shows that the malfunctioning of entire circuits may underlie many mental disorders. I also think the brain and mental health is much more complex than just circuits, but this is a very important piece of mental health too. And I'm just going to read this highlighted at the bottom. When the circuits are not able to function as normal information processing can be biased, less organized, and lead to distorted assessment of the internal and external world. And so I think that, you know, throughout our lives, we can probably all relate to that to some degree, whether within ourselves, where we totally missed the mark or misinterpreted as somebody's intention, and, you know, and vice versa. So kind of moving on to the brain regions. We're talking about these three areas of the brain, and this is highlighted in Pi's OCD setup, as well as Jeffrey Schwartz in his book, Brain Lock, and the brain that changes itself. He talks about this too. But the orbital prefrontal cortex that sits right behind the eyes, the cingulate gyrus, or sometimes they call it the cingulate cortex. It sits right on top of the limbic brain, and you can see the limbic brain here, but sometimes it's used interchangeably, as I've done some research. It's fascinating. As you go to study the brain, they call it different things. It's so vast and complex. So once again, I'm just trying to keep this as simple as possible. Orbital prefrontal cortex, cingulate gyrus, and then the caudate nucleus. And we'll go over the role of these three parts of the brain. And obviously, the brain doesn't work in isolation. As we work with these areas of the brain, it also impacts other areas of the brain too. And we're keeping this as simple as possible. Obviously, the amygdala, or the hippocampus, there's other areas of the brain that are involved in working hard to keep us safe. We are just referring to these three. So as you begin the setup, and I'll show you again, I do have a demo, but we want to begin with the cognitive front loading. Just like brain spotting, traditional brain spotting, bottom up, you have the cognitive front load. I still cognitive load through the session. I don't talk as much. I try to stay in the tail of the comment as we're teaching the brain how to move into regulation. But the education that I really like is we're teaching them about their brain. And this is where the pink squishy brain comes in. It looks silly, but it grabs people's attention. And I've had people say they just think about the pink squishy brain and it helps calm them when they realize their alarms are going off and there's no danger. So if you feel ridiculous using the brain, then feel free to not use it. Amazon, I think I pay $11 for 2 of them. It's just a cheap teaching tool. But I kind of put it on the top of my head, and I explain that, you know, we want to kind of see that these eyes are the eyes of your brain. I mean, you've got your eyes that are connected to your brain. but that your brain is always on the lookout trying to keep you safe. And the orbital prefrontal cortex, Joseph Cossolino, he calls it the apex of your internal and external world. So it's helping you take in the external world, and it's helping interpret the sensations coming up from your body as it's trying to make sense of it. So if it detects mistake, it will signal the cingulate gyrus. So it's here on alert, but I mean, I know that I think our threat detection system, we're doing more of that subconsciously, but as we're here, it's helping us take in the good and then the danger. So if it senses that something is wrong, it's going to draw your attention to what's wrong. These eyeballs pop out. And in that space, your sensory input is heightened. Your visual acuity, what you're hearing, maybe, even your proprioception, what you're feeling in your body, outside your body, is heightened. And then if you see that it's just a bunny, these go back in, and you kind of just, whew, okay, let's keep going on our hike. And then a little while later, you might hear something or start to smell something, and you look down and this locks on to danger. There's a family of skunks right there. Your brain is going to help you decide whether you run or whether you freeze, because it wants to keep you safe. Now, that makes sense in the context of that. But what happens when you're not in imminent danger? Maybe you're just sitting at home, and you have a random thought, or you're reminded of something you said earlier in that day, and you're just like, oh my gosh, did I really say that? You got some looping shame-based thoughts, some dread, and it's a false alarm, because in that moment you're safe. But when that happens, so we're looking at this when it happens outside of imminent danger or a horrific, horrible moral failing. Your orbital prefrontal cortex sends a message to the cingulate gyrus that sits actually right behind the orbital prefrontal cortex. Now, the cingulate gyrus is connected to, it help with fight or flight, but it connects to the chest area and the gut. So we all have felt anxiety or dread in our gut, in our chest. These are just popular hangouts for our emotions. But that, when I call these, when I teach this to my clients, lights and sirens, and I'm touching my stomach. We don't need lights and sirens on unless there's imminent danger. And I want to respect the fact that, like, even just socially, being left out hurts, but we can help it hurt a lot less so that you can go from here to kind of see the bigger picture and decide how you want to show up. So we're just neutralizing these defenses. We're quieting the lights and sirens, just like the cops do not drive around with lights and sirens on unless there is danger. That would just be weird and defeat the purpose. So I call this second spot kind of like the lights and sirens. The third spot, and this, it kind of makes sense. It goes in when we get like obsessive thinking thoughts, or maybe even replaying experiences in our mind, it can be maddening. The caudate nucleus that sits deeper down in the brain, in the subconscious, that's the automatic transmission, if you will, and filtering station for the front part of the brain. So when that detects threat, or when we're stuck in this loop, it sends it back up to the orbital prefrontal cortex, and we get into this obsessive thinking, which, if there was imminent danger, it makes so much sense that you want to remember that you're being chased by skunks, so you don't stop and call your mom and ask her what's for dinner. I get distracted easy. You might forget. And I'm being a little sarcastic there too. But it makes sense in the context of if we've got imminent danger, to keep those looping thoughts. Your body's in that fight or flight mode. It's releasing the cortisol. It's doing what it needs to do to keep you safe. But outside of that, it's a false alarm. Okay. So some of the key points I share, just like I did there, is when this is helpful. And then we share when it's not helpful. And you can keep that as simple or as complex as you want. I've actually done this setup once with my husband, who was actually, I didn't know if it would work, but I accidentally fed him some chocolate that had nuts in it, and he's allergic to nuts. So we gave him the EpiPen. We knew he was going to be okay. But when he was just, it kind of ruined our plans. I felt horrible. So, but he's like, I just can't stop the itching and the chest pain. And I was like, chest pain. Maybe this false alarm, because this false alarm can keep that fear pain cycle alive if you're going with chronic pain. And so I was like, maybe it'll work for this. So I said, hey, are you open to trying this? So I gave like 20, not even 20 seconds worth of cognitive front load of, hey, we've got this fear circuit, and it might be keeping this going and fueling the intensity of your anaphylaxis as you're recovering. And so I just helped him find I use my finger to notice. I'll explain the setup a little bit more. But you notice where they can think about the knowledge more? And I'm not kidding, within 20 seconds, his nervous system was able to feel calm so he could recover. And his body could heal from what his wife tried to do to him. It was an accident, I promise. But we want to use this or to see that you can use this in lots of situations, just not with in the therapy mindset of fear and shame, but using this in ways you personalize it to the client situation and stepping into the uncertainty. Maybe this will help you help work. I've also used this for car sickness too. Anytime you think that the brain's just working harder than it needs to. So another important thing is be authentic. This teaches authenticity, like that acceptance of whatever I'm feeling is okay. And it's important. So we want to see the thoughts that people have, like they're kids in the classroom. We want their thoughts to know that they're important. So what they have to say, we want to know so we can appropriately address them. So it does create this differentiation between who you are and your brain. I use this simple saying, you're not your brain, you have a brain. And so we want to help teach your brain how to orient to safety. Reminding them looping thoughts are important in dangerous situations. And when there's not dangerous situations imminent, then it's a false alarm. And this is still being mindful of everybody's unique situation and respectful of what could be going on or what is going on in their life. We really want to work with that. And this is a key thing too. We don't want to fear any sensations in our body. Our fear response can fuel the intensity and power they have over us. And that your brain doing this isn't because you've done anything wrong. Remember, no one has life all figured out, and everyone has irrational fear and shame. So we invite them to be the observer. So this is where you're kind of, if you're thinking, how do I apply this? This would be a good way. Give them just some cognitive front loading. Again, it doesn't have to be a lot. I do this with kids too. So you can keep it very simple. You want to invite them to be the observer of their thoughts and sensations. And in the fear, as we work on fear, I do teach them we don't want to fear shame, because if we fear it, we fuel the power it has over us. We don't want to fear any sensations in our body. And because the frontal lobe's job is to make meaning of our experience, we can help provide a more accurate thought or label. So we help them relabel. They've got lights and sirens going off. This is a false alarm. It's a circuit issue. And I use this phrase, use what feels comfortable to you. I just say, just kind of smile at the dread or uncomfortable sensations. We want to send some feedback that it's okay. And you can observe those sensations in your body like sharks or fish at the aquarium, just noticing that they're there to help neutralize what's going on. And I saw Maria's here. I was teaching this to her and we called it fake news. She said she called it fake news, which was really funny with Trump and all of that. So however you feel about Trump, the fake news, I think, is still funny. And then the fear, false evidence appearing real. Just teaching them that really it's safe to feel safe when we're safe. Or it's okay to feel calm when it's calm, if safe is too much. This is another important piece. We want to help them get comfortable in uncertainty. And I remember when I first started brain spotting, I had to brain spot that word uncertainty because it shut me down. And I couldn't even remember the phrase of it. And so I found that fascinating. But it makes a lot of sense how uncertainty can feel really scary. But because in your moment with the client, they are safe, and helping them see in this moment, let's see if we can get more comfortable in the uncertainty, because that's what we want to do with their thoughts. And so this is where there's a little bit more intervention that comes in. We want to invite the thoughts into uncertainty or the maybes and what this might look like. Let's say, I use this example because I am getting better, but I do have a weird aversion to new foods. And the thought associated with that is I'm going to die. Obviously, that's an irrational thought. I'll get a pit in my stomach. So within this spot, I might say, maybe, maybe not, even though I know I'm not going to die. But we're teaching the brain, we've got to get more comfortable in the uncertainty. So you're teaching your brain, let's lean into the uncertainty together. Maybe, maybe not. Let's see how this goes. So when you know that you're safe and everybody else eats tomatoes, why can't you, Julie? Let's lean into the uncertainty together. So it could be, that's obviously a very neutral example, but it can be a wide range of things. But when they know in that moment they're safe, and is to the best of their knowledge, the people in their life are safe. It's easier to do that. And you help them invite the thoughts into uncertainty. And I just, especially because their brain spot for this physical safety might be, if it's lower, I just gonna say, just see if they'll kind of go down the slide. Let's just kind of lean into uncertainty without feeling forced. We do not force anything. That will light up the fear response too. So we meet them where they're at, we teach them, and we invite to lean into this. And if it takes a while, it takes a while. So once again, in the fear spot, I might teach about shame as well, depending on the situation. But this is where, if the thought is I am worthless, looping thoughts, maybe, maybe not, brain. Maybe I'm worthless, maybe not. And I just kind of invite them to dance with that sensation in their body, because in this very moment, there's no relational threat. I think it's pretty common, you're sitting across from somebody or next to somebody, and you have no judgment at all for what's going to come out of their mouth, but they might think you do. Or another example of this, I had a client who was so afraid to ask women out, so nervous, and that's scary. Rejection's a real thing. And so I kind of joked around and I said, well, you know what? In this moment, we're not going out on a date. We're not getting together. Let's invite those thoughts into uncertainty. Maybe, maybe not, because in this moment, there's no relational threat. You're not taking Julie on a date. And so we laughed, and it really helped him just kind of loosen that up. The other thing is, what we want to do is find a healthy source of dopamine if we get caught up in this. And we can't always, and we don't always need to find a healthy source of dopamine. Sometimes it calms right down, but just wanting to bring in this extra bit of knowledge that finding, something simple that's a healthy source of dopamine, and not one that's going to create a problem down the road, but like sunshine exercise, completing a task, doing service, where you're intentionally going out in service of your mental health and emotional regulation. Okay. So this, after the front loading, this, once again, I think is the most important spot. And what we do, and actually I might just move on to the video so you can see. but we focus on where it's easier to think about and focus on the knowledge. So we draw their attention to the knowledge, the part of your brain that's going to help you focus, hold on to this knowledge, make sense of it. And for neurodivergent, neurodiversity, it can be harder for us to have that working memory and to hold on to things, because if we can't focus, it makes it really difficult to solve problems. But when we're safe and your brain can take this in, it starts to pick up on it and learn. So we have the client focus on this part of their brain. And we invite them to address the internal experience before we make sense of the external experience. So we stay here, invite them to get curious with what they notice. You stay in the tail of the comment. If you use a SUDS, you want to stay here. Well, then I invite you to use a SUDS, actually. But it's like 8 to 10. We're not going to where they feel better, actually. It's where they believe the knowledge. So you want to keep them to at least an 8 out of 10, like that I believe this is a circuit issue. So they might only start out at a 3, and you just keep them there and invite them to notice what comes up. If they are dealing mostly with fear-based thoughts or, definitely OCD, then you move them into spots 2 and 3 of Pi's OCD setup, which I'm not teaching that, but I usually just do spot, this is the fear spot, and then we move into shame, which would be the second spot. So I'm going to start with the demo. Now I'll give you a little bit of background. This is my friend, and I'm laughing because as I look at this video, there's a huge block on that bookshelf that says pray. If you pray, I hope you pray. My friend let me use their podcast studio, and they do podcasts, more spiritually based podcasts. And so I apologize if you don't like that word. I didn't realize it till afterwards, and I really honestly didn't want to go back and redo it. So use that word if it's helpful, but I promise I'm not trying to trick you into praying subliminally. She has never done brain spotting before. She is a therapist. She has done EMDR. And so this was a whole new experience for her. She actually processed and did this very well. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But it can help you see how people can move through this and respond. Because she knew this was a teaching video and I wanted to kind of highlight a few things, I know I talked more in this than I normally would have. But I still tried to hold space and have that attunement with her. So we're going to start here. And then after this, we'll take a break. Just noticing our time. Okay. One thing to think about, where you look affects how you feel. And so what we want to do, well, it doesn't just affect how you feel. It actually affects how you think too. And so I'm not going to have you focus so much on how you feel. I want to draw your attention up to the front of the brain, because those are the executive functioning skills that we want to come online, because as those come online more, it actually helps calm our subconscious and calm our defenses. And our pro-social behaviors actually come online. And so it's easier to have compassion and be there for other people with healthy boundaries. So I'm going to put your eye in 3 positions. We'll start on your right, and then we'll go to the middle, and then the left. And I'm going to have you just notice, or you can even rate, like on a 0 to 10 scale, how easy or difficult it is for you to think about and focus on this knowledge. Do you think about those 3 circuits in your brain, and just the idea that we all have these false alarms, and that it's safe to feel safe when we're safe. Type of a concept, just where you can think about it a little easier. There might be less intrusive thoughts, less mind chatter. Okay. And if you can't tell the difference, that just feel free to let me know. There's a lot of ways to get this right. And so I just want you to feel like you can just relax and see what works best for you. Okay. So I'm going to start about eye level, and I'm going to go over here. My brain. Oops, I dropped it. As you're over here, I just want you to check in with the front of your brain. Draw your attention to the front of your brain and notice your ability to think and focus on what I'm saying as you think about your fear response. And then we'll compare it with the middle, if you're okay if I move to the middle. And we can stop anywhere along the way. But if you're like, oh, I feel it a little bit this way, you just let me know. As you're here, notice if it's easier to think about and focus on this knowledge here, even holding it in your working memory. So you can kind of play with it, make sense of it. Here or over here? On the right. On the right? Okay. I'm going to keep this as a bookmark. Go to the left. Can you back me for just right there? Okay. So as you compare the left to the right.
I feel like so Sender is like almost more anxiety provoking.
Okay.
But I feel like those two are pretty similar. Is that a thing?
Very much.
I feel like those two are pretty similar.
If you were to put a number on it, like 0 to 10, how's your focus and thought here? Or maybe it's easier to think about it. Feels more true without feeling forced.
Maybe like a 7 on the right. And then probably a little less on the left, like a 5 or 6.
Okay. So are you okay if we go over here? We've got this stand that I'm going to put this in, about right here for you. Because while we talk, I'll invite you to just stay on the brain side, the eye position. See, as we go up, just notice. It's easier to think about and focus on this. Again, without feeling forced.
Like right there.
Right here. We'll keep this here. Do you want to compare it with below eye level?
Sure.
So I'll just keep this here and go down. Right there? Okay, okay, wonderful. So I'm gonna have you do, just keep your eye in that position. If you need to take it off for any reason, that's perfectly fine. I'm gonna invite you to just notice whatever you notice. You're the one observing what's going on in there. And sometimes it's easier to think about, you're the intentional voice in your head. Notice whatever you notice. If there's any sensations in your body, sometimes we start here. Reminding your mind we don't want to fear any sensations in our body. Notice what's coming up for you as you're there. Small or slow.
Do you want more thoughts that are coming to me, or like body sensations, or what would be the best?
What feels more prominent right now?
Actually, body sensations.
Okay.
Like it feels actually a little weird in my head. It's very interesting. And like behind my eyes, feels weird. And that's kind of what's forefront right now, I think.
Okay. I invite you to stay curious with those sensations in your head and behind your eyes. Sometimes I'll tell people, just go smile at those sensations if we can get curious and allow.
Thinking about my kids right now.
And notice what comes.
I feel like my brain's pretty empty right now,
Okay.
which is kind of interesting because that's not normal. I mean,
Just take that in.
now starting to just have thoughts of like work and just that stuff that's the stuff that starts happening.
Do you notice any sensations in your chest or gut?
Gut.
Okay. Try it. A lot of times those sensations in your gut can be linked into shame. And so as you notice, especially in this spot, because we don't want to fear shame. We've all got it to varying degrees and for various reasons. In this moment, there's no relational threat. So as you notice those sensations in the gut, just reminding your brain it's safe to feel. Doesn't mean you've done anything wrong. Definitely, to the best of our ability, it benefits us to smile at those sensations. We don't want them tagged as dangerous. A good acronym for fear that I like is false evidence appearing real. So we definitely don't want to fear that. It can distort the power that it has over us.
Will you say that again? False evidence
Appearing real.
appearing real. Yeah, that's interesting. There's some when you said that there is some shame there.
And through this, because a lot of times guilt will stand on the shoulders of shame. And so if there's anything that you have done that you need to apologize for, taking the shame out of it will just allow you to take care of what you need to take care of or recognize. I think that's probably a non-issue.
Do you want me to talk about like the thoughts that I have?
You can talk as little or as much as you want.
So this is, I feel like this is a thought I haven't actually consciously had. But it's the whole thing about like having your house in order before you look at other people's houses.
Oh.
And so so in the work that I do, right, there's an expectation. And so that's kind of, it's interesting that's kind of coming.
Oh, yeah. Notice what happens as that thought comes up.
It's pretty miserable. Honestly, I don't think I've had that thought consciously.
Mm-hmm. So there's the thought, and sometimes it sounds like a shame-based thought.
Mm-hmm.
It might we might be able to work through that a little bit more on the shame spot. But with shame, we usually it seems like it's easier to focus on the sensation and just kind of let the thought be there. So when we can release that sensation.
So the sensation in my stomach is gone.
Okay.
Which is interesting. Any other sensations you're noticing? A lot of it right now is just noticing the music going back and forth. There's a lot of it right now. Any sensations in the back of your head or behind your eyes? Behind my eyes is gone. Back of my head a little bit. If you're okay, let's check in with your brain to just see, as we think about fear brain, how true does it feel that when we've got looping thoughts or lights and sirens on and there's no imminent danger, that it's a false alarm? Faulty neurosystem. How true does it feel? Okay. That's very, very true. 0 to 10, you're 10 being the most true. Like, so when I'm feeling that, understanding that I am safe, how like it's a 10. Okay. Any, well, you kind of cleared that pretty quickly, which is great. And this is a spot that you can use frequently. One thing, because you didn't have any looping thoughts, which was great, we're able to show you how to invite those thoughts into uncertainty. So if you're okay, I'm gonna have you go back to this spot. We'll just practice. Okay. Like, let's say there's a thought, and because this is fear-based, and maybe it's something bad's gonna happen. And so what we're going to do is invite your brain, front of your brain, to step into uncertainty, as you help orient it to safety. Brain, in this moment, we're safe to the best of our knowledge, and our people we love are safe. We get more comfortable in the uncertainty of this. So maybe not. Let's lean into the uncertainty of that. Because if we give our thoughts certainty, sometimes we need to. But it's a good practice to get comfortable in the uncertainty. That helps release the loop. Because if we give it certainty either way, uncertainty either way might look like calling everybody or saying, no, we're fine, everybody's fine. When we don't really know 100%, but it might be safe to assume, just getting more comfortable in the uncertainty. Sometimes I like to say, brain, we need to step into the maybes right here. All right, well, can we cross that bridge when and if we come to it? And so in this spot you'll want to practice this ahead of time, because it is very common as we're tapping into neuroplasticity. So we're developing these mental habits through the process of neuroplasticity to help calm the nervous system and creating new circuits of regulation. I want you to kind of think of the analogy of a baby learning to walk. It needs to fall down from time to time. Well, not needs to, but it does. Just like you're going to fall into this again. But we need to learn how to stand up. And so it's through the process of re-regulation that your brain also develops those skills, and it wants to help you. It wants to be regulated. Any thoughts coming up as I share that?
A bunch of just random thoughts as you're talking about like family members and safety, but nothing that really like sticks. You know, just thoughts of like my parents and my husband and stuff like that, but nothing that really like sticks out as concerning, I guess.
Nothing activating?
Gut, actually.
You can feel it in your gut.
Yeah. A little bit, but not as much as before.
Okay. Another thing I want to point out, when we are in an activated state and we're locked on with looping thoughts, it's harder to see the big picture. And so our intention here is just to get you back into that ventral vagal state so that you can engage in goal-directed behavior, see the bigger picture. Even, you know, when we're activated, we actually will have gaps in our memory. And so this will allow you to think more clearly through things and remember aspects of a situation that you might not remember when you're in an activated state. This is where we function optimally. So if you're ready, we'll move on to the shame spot.
Okay. This is the first part of the setup. And if you want, we can pause now, take a quick break, or we can keep going without the break just to save time. But we can, if we want to take a 5-minute break and maybe come back for 1 or 2 questions, and then I'll pick right back up again. Is there a consensus? Do people want breaks? Kind of put your thumb up if you want to take a break. If not, we might keep going with just questions. And Josh, you have to be my eyes.
Yeah, I think a break would probably be good. Maybe just 5 minutes, and then we
Okay,
can.
let's take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back.
Sounds good. Thanks. Were you going to do the questions if anybody had them?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
We probably just have time for a couple questions, but yes, I would love questions.
So anybody that has one, just do your raise hand function. Looks like we have a couple. Marion?
Hi, it's Maren.
Maren.
I didn't quite catch, what do you invite them to mindfully process on that first spot?
I'm glad you brought that up because I didn't point that out. I don't activate anything. So it's more about the knowledge. If they are activated around something already, that's great. They don't need to be calm by any means. And sometimes they'll notice a shift quicker if they are a little activated. I just have them focus on or notice where they can focus a little bit more on the knowledge that I shared. So in that clip, you didn't see the cognitive front loading that I did with her, just because I did a lot of it with you guys. And so for the sake of time, I just wanted her to see where she could think about this information more easily, because you can't really think and feel activated at the same time. And so she was just focusing on the knowledge. Great question. Thank you for asking.
Kim?
So I don't know what the front loading is. I know you talked about it for 45 minutes or whatever, but I'm still very unsure how to concisely say, like what am I front loading? Am I front loading that their circuits can loop? Am I front loading all the stuff about the 3 parts of the brain? Am I front loading the eyeballs poking out? Like what as you can tell, I'm feeling activated. What am I front loading?
This is a pretty easy, like keeping it simple, because yeah, you can front load a lot of things and you don't have to front load hardly anything either. So I would stick with the 3 parts of the brain. Okay. Yeah, I would just do that. That way if you, as you practice this and do it more, you will, it'll come easier, especially at first. I would just do the orbital prefrontal cortex, cingulate gyrus, and caudate nucleus.
And just how they work together and how we can be in these loops and it can tell us that we're in danger when we're not in danger.
Yep.
And then we like focus on the thought.
And just the brain.
Your brain.
And the wisdom, the knowledge, not really the knowledge.
The knowledge of you're not in danger. You're not in danger?
You're not in danger. And just that we have these parts of the brain that work together to keep us safe.
Okay.
And it could be a misinterpretation of threat.
Okay. Thank you.
Great question. Thank you for bearing with me. It is a lot of information. And I've been practicing this for like 3 years, so it just comes very naturally for me. Yeah, keep it very simple. Those 3 parts. Chapter 6 of The Brain That Changes Itself, that's a great book to read about this. Well, the chapter 6, it's a great book to read. But Pi took hers from The Brain That Changes Itself, but Brain Lock, he goes into the science behind it too. So you can even show the client, this is page 47 of Brain Lock if you have this book, the parts of the brain, and he breaks it down too. I just keep it simple. They just want to feel better, but bringing in a little bit of knowledge will go a long way. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to shame. And I'm going to skim through this, but you'll be able to see this again for the sake of time. Now, I want you to know though, I was kind of like I recognized early on that it felt like so many problems that we have come back to shame. And so I thought if we can help people just work with shame, we can do a lot of things. So I took a whole year of my life. I called it my shame on. And I leaned into every shame sensation I could feel in my body. And there was still something I was coming up short with. And that was, I have ADHD. This was before I knew I had ADHD. This was before I knew what rejection sensitive dysphoria was. And this is, I think for me, this was the missing piece that I needed, because it was like, just like with OCD, you want to take an executive functioning approach. You want to do the same with RSD. And there's probably other approaches, and I know nutritional stuff and things like that. But for the sake of what we can do in brain spotting, this is what I know to use, and it can work really well. I feel like it took this top-down approach, and it complemented what I had already done. Because this is a continual thing. I use that fear spot all the time. Even just like if I'm overwhelmed or I've got a lot going on, because my brain's still working. That orbital prefrontal cortex is like a really good caregiver, busy, and it gets frazzled from time to time. And so doing that with my fear, checking in, like my fear spots in the lower left, like even as I check in now, I'll probably yawn. And by checking in, I'm just like, how am I doing today? And I notice any sensations and I start to release. Done the same thing for shame. My shame spot's over here, and I'll check in. So we really want to take the shame out of feeling shame. We've all got it. Okay. So this is a slide that just talks about shame. Its purpose is like in teaching children, it helps to keep them safe and kind of keep us in the tribe, learning the rules of the culture and things like that. But shame without repair is toxic. And so we want to see that shame, and especially like in your office in the present moment, nobody's committing a horrible moral failing. Everybody's safe. That if you're activated around the shame, it's a false alarm. And or old stuff. And I should have emphasized that with the fear. Old stuff, we honor the trauma. You can use these spots to process trauma through too. We honor the trauma. We just want the brain to recognize this is not imminent. It is old, not imminent. And so we're here to help them orient to a sense of safety. They need to process trauma through these spots, or you can, find another just bottom up approach too. That's just fine. Because you might find old experiences coming up in here. You can do that here, but we want to just help them see that for so many of us, so much of the time, it's a false alarm, and we're all kind of swimming in it to varying degrees. And for the purpose of this setup, I think of shame, we're conceptualizing shame as looping shame-based thoughts or situations, feeling in the chest or gut, And, you feel like you've like run over your neighbor's dog on purpose when maybe you just had a messy house when the neighbor came over, things like that, this day-to-day stuff that we might not even realize how much shame is manifesting in our life. So briefly, I want to hit on rejection sensitive dysphoria. There's great information on the internet out there. The term was coined by William Dodson. He specializes in ADHD. And he's noticed with his clients with ADHD that there were some common themes with their shame response. And for ADHD, and I'm guessing for a lot of individuals that have neurodivergence, the emotional regulation piece can be the biggest problem. And I think for myself too, it was fine I didn't know math, but the shame was devastating. So understanding and really appreciating what might be going on inside some of your clients. And these are just some ways that you might notice that manifest. We become people pleasers or really angry and rage out. It can lead to relapse and addiction and things like that because it can feel so intense. And it's not that people that have RSD are weak. It's just that it's heavy and it's hard. And it can come with a wide range of behaviors. So this I call is the relational safety spot. It's just easier in my office. I just call it the shame spot, but that can be a little confusing because it's not where they feel the shame the most. It's where it's easier to feel the shame, where it's easier to orient to relational safety. Like it's safe to be me. And if your client has, with ADHD, it's 99% chance they have RSD. Excuse me. So you can call it the RSD spot if you want. Do what feels right and works for you and your client. And then you can, just like with the fear, you can share examples where high shame might be helpful. And one time I was joking around with a friend of mine and I said, like if you were to do a hit and run, probably should elicit a little bit of shame. And she laughed because she did do that in high school. And so we kind of joked. And so sometimes maybe somebody has committed something that you might consider a moral failing. The cops might actually be coming to get you, or a judge might actually be issuing a warrant for your arrest. But, for her, it was 20 years ago. It was old news in the past. And so just orienting to a sense of relational safety in the present moment, and validating that most of these experiences are false alarms. And even with feeling left out or that rejection, it does hurt. But we can help it hurt a lot less than it does, or that it's a non-issue. Because when this comes back online, we can see that, I actually don't even really want to hang out with that person that didn't invite me to the party, or I've got other things I want to do. It helps give us options. We become myopic and just see life through a narrow view. And we just want to come here so we can kind of see the bigger picture and then show up in a way that feels helpful for us and, the people around us if appropriate. So just some key points to remember. We cannot shame ourselves back into regulation. And so sometimes we'll hold on to our shame because we think it's actually keeping us relationally safe. So this can be a little scary for people to let go of that shame, or to kind of invited into the uncertainty. We want to let them know that let's just lean into that a little bit more so that you can get your executive functioning more online, and you can choose to show up in a more meaningful way. And so we move these shame-based thoughts into uncertainty, and you can process trauma on this spot. It's also used as an anchor of safety. These become anchors of safety, so that if you do a bottom-up approach and they get activated, they can go back to this spot as well to orient to a sense of safety, and that this is old, not imminent. And then reminding people, practice this. It's a process. And just like you practice the piano as well, the more you do it, just the more naturally it comes. And I remember when I was first doing this, I spoke up in a conference, and then, I questioned myself, did I say the right thing? And as that activation was coming up, I hear this thought coming, false alarm, false alarm. And then the activation went back down. So it was pretty awesome. It's like your brain is learning this and it wants to help you regulate. And you'll know, you know, we all kind of do it differently. So I'm going to just go right to the video for the sake of time, and I'll probably cut that video short, but you do inside window. And if you notice when I did that setup for fear, I don't go all the way across. I stop because this is a lot of information to take in. And I found that it's just easier to contain this. Where they notice it as we compare like the right to the middle, where they notice that, I bookmark first. And then, so we're really just comparing 2 spots at a time and then going back to it. I have found that tends to work easier and it's more a fluid approach. You might find something different. So because I need to move this to 17 minutes. Okay, I think I'll just start here and we'll see where that's
One thing to think about, where you look affects how
Nope.
you feel.
Okay.
One thing to think about, where you look affects how you
No, maybe it'll work. You know what I'll do for the sake of time? You can see me trying to help her find her spot. And we're gonna, the spot feels different because it's shame. Shame sends it's got a different thought attached to it.
right here.
Okay, so it'll be in a different spot, but sometimes they're close.
So that's going to be your first brain spot because our brain orients to physical safety first and then relational safety. Okay, remember that spot, and then you can just notice where this eye position is. And as you think about shame, and in this moment, there's no relational threat. It's safe to be you. And even as I say that, if you feel a little funny, just smile at the shame. You want to know it's safe to feel. Usually we spend a lot of time avoiding it because it's heavy and not always so nice. We don't want to fear shame. Unless you've committed a horrible moral failing. Judge has issued a warrant for your arrest. You're going to be in front of a judge. You want to give you permission to hold grace for yourself. So while you're here, do you notice any like kids in the classroom with shame? Like, what about this? Or remember when you did that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then any sensations in your body?
Not really. Like I can kind of feel like on this side of my brain a little bit and a little bit behind the side. But that's fine. Nothing like lights or silence.
What for you is you just kind of trust your intuition, because remember there's a lot of ways to do this right. Is there anything that you feel like is drawing your attention in more, you've got questions about, with the thoughts or the sensations?
I'm starting to get sensations in my chest.
Okay. Up and down.
And then I think just a lot of the chatter, like, remember this, you did this, you know, that sort of thing, kind of those thoughts. Trying to
Just allow them to come. If they start looping though, if you notice any core negative beliefs. So, well, because I did that, what does that say about me? It's usually I am good enough. or something. Maybe a different flavor, actually.
There's usually a lot around
So as you think about parents, or your parenting experience, the sensation in your body, ask that sensation, what does it say about you? What does that say about you?
there's no response.
Okay. Just notice the sensation.
That it's going on.
80% of our experience is actually sensory, and so if we can help with sensations, like the rest of it.
No thoughts, just sensations can still on the side a little bit.
Okay, draw your attention to those sensations. Sometimes they have a story to tell, and other times they don't. I think I'm going to pause this video here for the sake of time. This gives you an idea of what finding that shame spot or the relational safety spot would look like. And then you would continue to process it like you did on the fear spot. Just allowing the sensations, inviting any looping thoughts into uncertainty. Now, if you wanted to continue watching more of that, please email me. And I have the whole session. It's like an hour and 10 minutes on a Vimeo link. I'm happy to send it to you. And I can give you my email at the end. So know if you're like, if you want to just see this video from start to finish, that's wonderful. Just email me and I'll just shoot you the link. But I do want to continue so that we can get to this next part. The next part in this 3-part setup, and when I was learning this, until I learned about the reticular activating system, I was like, I can't share this yet because there's something more that we're missing. And then when I learned about the reticular activating system, I really felt like this is it. And so I'm going to move on to that. The reticular activating system sits at the base. It's more in the brainstem. And if you're familiar, it's part of the reticular formation. And it receives the sensory input coming up from the body. And also what you're seeing and hearing. From my understanding, it does not process smell, though. That goes right to the amygdala. But it's really an interesting, I have found it so helpful to learn about. So I don't want to shortchange this. The reticular activating system, as we look at it, it controls our sleep, wake, and attention. It's a sophisticated filter. It's supposed to screen out the junk because we can't take it all in, and we don't want to take it all in because it can be very overwhelming. And some people will struggle with taking too much sensory input in. And so this can help with sensory overwhelm as well. And it acts like an executive assistant. So I use this part of my brain to help me figure out life. And it shows you what it thinks you want to see. And so we want to recognize this powerful tool that we have back here. When I discovered this, I kind of felt like it was like a genie in a bottle, a little bit.
but really, I still think it's kind of like a genie in a bottle, but maybe not to that extent. That's just the feeling it gave me as I first started to work with it, and asking it to help me accomplish my goals. So this might be something you've never heard about, but just keep an open mind and see where it takes you. So the reticular activating system, it supports motor, sensory, behavior, cognitive, and mood-related activities as well. And it's responsible for the information coming up from the body, and then it communicates it to other areas of the brain and the cortex. And it's part of the reticular formation, which is home to several groups of cells that produce neurotransmitters and have extensive connections throughout the central nervous system. Just like the slide said, it assists with modulating perceptions, motor activities, and behavioral responses. So it plays a big role in our mental health and activation. So I just want to show you this slide, because here, this is a very busy slide and it can feel very overwhelming. So think about if you're trying to read or focus on one thing and they're like the background, like there's too many mental tabs open, or like your brain might feel like Grand Central Station and it's not allowing you to focus on what you want to focus on. And so you can kind of see the difference there. The RAS can actually help working with it. You can actually kind of close the mental tabs. You talk directly to it. And when we're feeling safe, it tends to listen, depending on how you talk to it. So I'm not going to show you that. I'm going to go right to the video again, because I walk you through this and I want to save some time for questions, but I'm going to take us into the video to the back of the brain, the reticular activating system. And you can start here too. You don't have to do this in order. You can start here. Let's just say the client cannot focus at all. Don't hesitate to start here. This just makes it easier when it's calm, and you can see her brain isn't that busy when we get to this point, and she recognizes that it usually is busy.
One thing to think about, where you look.
I'm sorry. I wish I was more techie. But honestly, I'm pretty impressed with myself for getting this in.
When you're learning how to play the piano too.
We're gonna keep
One thing to think about, where you.
I'm sorry. Let's see. I'm gonna do this again. We'll just start here.
Something amazing. It was just this great release and just clarity. And I thought, oh, I got to figure this out. So this is knowledge that I've gathered. And this won't just include the reticular activating system. There's a lot of complex brain circuits going on back here. It helps with so many things. But I call it the RAS spot, reticular activating system, but I really want to be clear that this does not just involve the RAS, because I don't have a brain scan. I don't know what all it involves. But if you study the reticular activating system and understand it, you have these great capacities that help you be more intentional with life. So the reticular activating system shows you what it thinks you want to see. And so it's there to help you accomplish your goals. But if you've got these looping thoughts like I'm not good enough, guess what's going to show you? All the ways you're not good enough. So learning this helped me really appreciate the thoughts I'm telling myself. Once again, we don't want to fear them. We kind of want to catch them, because every so often I might catch a thought and I'm like, no, Raz, no. Show me how I'm doing just fine today. Because I don't want that to be projected out. And it can be, it's like a filter that we view the world through. And so we need to check our filter from time to time. And so as you think about your reticular activating system, it's at the base of your skull. It's about the size of a pencil eraser. But there's a lot of things, there's a lot that it does to help, even with motor movement, sensory input. All of your senses, except for smell, go through the reticular activating system. So when we're overwhelmed, sometimes it's overstimulation. Go back there and just kind of help calm and quiet. And ask it to help you accomplish your goals. Manifesting took on a whole new role to me as I understood the reticular activating system. Another example of this might be, have you ever bought a new car and then all of a sudden you're seeing that new car everywhere?
I've heard of people doing that.
I haven't. That hasn't been. I've heard of people doing that. What about when you were pregnant? Did you feel like everybody was pregnant?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a common one, example that they do. So it shows you what it thinks you want to see when all the time people are pregnant all the time. But it wasn't coming into your field of view and perception. The other thing that it does, like let's say you're eating out and it's loud. Your reticular activating system actually helps you focus on who you're talking to. But let's say, and then they call your name, you're gonna hear that and orient to it. But for some of us, we can take in way too much sensory input. And so this is a way to help support our sensory systems. So any questions so far? So you think about your reticular activating system. What I'm going to have you do, and I don't use the pointer, but if I were to say, Rebecca, can you sense the inside of your feet?
Yeah.
Okay, and for your eyes kind of go in their own position, and for some reason you just feel like, I think I'm connected. Okay, so now I'm going to ask you, can you sense the inside of the back of your brain? So you can close your eyes if you want.
Yeah, I think so.
Really just go to that back of your brain. And I'm going to have you lock in that eye position.
This is a gaze spot.
And this might sound a little quirky, but go along with me if you will. I want you to extend a hand of fellowship to the back of your brain. It's like you're meeting a good friend. It's working for us night and day. This also helps with your sleep and wake cycle too. So if you can, bring some gratitude back there and just notice what happens as you do that.
It feels like it just relaxes a little bit.
So notice that relax. Now, how I usually start this is ask you to notice if your mind was a mental stage, would it be busy right now back there, or is it calm? Another analogy you could maybe use is mental tabs. You know, the tabs on your computer or phone. How many mental tabs do you have open back there?
Usually there's a ton. Right this second, there's not.
If there were a ton open, I would ask you to ask the RAS to close the mental tabs. And it can do that. Have you ever had the experience of maybe you've got a song playing in your head and you're trying to focus on reading? The RAS is a great place to go to be like, RAS, can we turn the radio off? Please help me focus on reading. Or if those tabs are open too much, I need to close some of those tabs so that I can prioritize my family right now.
Or I'm trying to read and I'm thinking about all the things I'm supposed to be doing. Or I'm trying to, like study or something. And it's like, yeah, but you need to do laundry, you need to do this work thing. Yeah. Yeah, that happens.
Yeah. So this is a good place to go so that your RAS knows. You can even ask it to remind you. Ask the RAS, will you remind me to check in with you more frequently so we can calm the tabs, close the tabs. And find the metaphor you like better.
closing the tabs work because my kids make fun of me all the time for having so many tabs open on my computer and my phone. So closing the tabs is very realistic. Yes.
Okay, I'm going to stop this right now. I know we only have 5 minutes left. Before we move to questions, I want to let you know we are starting a consult group to learn this because it is a lot of information. I'm working with Chris Deason as we talk about, the power of relationships. There's so much wealth in our relationships, and then incorporating neural safety in that. So we will have this, but I do want to open it back, or I want to open it up for questions. And I'm going to stop sharing screen. Okay. Everybody's brain fried? Hi, Nancy. It's good to see you. Now, I'm willing to bet nobody's ever asked you, or you've never asked anybody to sense the inside of the back of their brain. How that came to be and that got cut off. I was shoveling snow and listening to Joseph Ledoux in my earphones. And he was talking about the reticular activating system. And I thought to myself, I wonder where my reticular activating system is. And I floated back to the back of my brain. And that is when I knew, oh my gosh, I'm onto something. There is something here. And so I wanted to do more research. So that got cut off. But I apologize. This should be a whole day thing. So I just wanted to give you some basic information. I hope you're not leaving with more questions than answers, but reality is you really could be.
Kim does have one question if you have time.
Yes.
Okay, I have like lots of questions, but I'll go as fast as I can. Are those spots ever activating? Because if you were to do 45-degree angles with me, I have activation spots at each 45-degree angle and right in front of me. They are activating spots. So does that ever happen?
What I have noticed, because intention is important, and as you're focusing here, it's hard to be activated and think clearly. So you might be less activated.
Got it.
So that's where I think that intention comes in. But what I have found before is if we found a spot and it becomes activating, sometimes we need to process something through and we just stay on that. And there has been 2 or 3 times though that I've done this where we just totally found the spot again, where the client thought this is the spot. And because it's not regulating, we've tried again and been successful.
Okay, second question. For the relational safety, it sounds like my target, and I don't know how else to put it, is it's safe to be you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then third one with the RAS, which I think is absolutely brilliant. I love it. When I did it while you were doing it with her.
I was hoping people would do it.
Yeah, I did it. And I did it with my eyes closed. And I was afraid because it's almost like I'm looking backwards. So can you just do it with your eyes closed?
Yes.
Okay.
And I just tell people, just notice the direction that I say that eye position is really important because it helps you lock in that spot where you can connect to the RAS. Because sometimes if I'm tired, my eye might drift, my RAS spots here. That just helps me lock in and I can connect with the RAS and talk to it. And it talks back. I don't know how else to describe it. It's pretty cool. Any other questions? Now, would you like me to share I'll share my email address and I will be happy to send you that Vimeo link. And if there's links to other things that you want to know about, if you want consultation, great. If you want to do our consultation group, which is $300 for 6 sessions, let me know. And we can go from there. And so my email is Julie, Julie, at peakmentalhealth.net. I so appreciate the opportunity to share this with you and for Midwest Brainspotting Institute for giving me the chance. I just feel like it's so important to get this information out, and this is a great way to do it.
Yes, it's been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you so much. It adds to what I'm already super nerding out about and just gives me more avenues, and I really appreciate that. So thank you so much. And I'm sure we all would love to see the one day presentation if you ever put it together as well. So keep us updated on that. But thank you so much, Julie. We really
Yes.
appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great day.
All right.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Julie.
Shani, for putting my email address up there.
Yeah. Thank you so much.